Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, and welcome back to Movie Roundup, where I talk about a bunch of movies that I recently saw. Now, I have a lot of movies today, so let's get started. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. Here we go. The first film I watched today was Christopher Nolan's film Tenet. The film is about time, like most of Nolan's works, but this one, time is in reverse. When it comes to Chris Nolan's films, he sometimes cares more about the grand scale of things and neglects the characters. At Christopher Nolan's best, we get a deeply personal character story like Memento, or a balance of large scale and personal character development like Inception. However, for Tenet, the story doesn't really make any sense if you really think about it. The movie is very plot driven, but doesn't offer much for the story or character development. I wish I cared more about the people in the film. There's this mystery to the film that doesn't reveal itself until the end, but I wish there was more of a personal edge to it. There should be something more to sharpen the character's motivation. That being said, the film is a fun and exciting watch. I do like the reverse effects in the film. It's really the main selling point. While I didn't fully understand what is all happening, it's still very thrilling. Like the Warzone scene is a great example. Now, I don't know who's really fighting who in the scene, but it's still fun. My favorite scene is still definitely the hallway scene. The music was nothing special, but the cinematography was pretty good. One of the things I don't like is how they try to explain everything away in the middle of the film. You don't have to explain everything because it just makes the ideas more convoluted. The writing becomes way too over the top and corny near the end. I overall enjoyed my time with this rewatch, and I'm giving this a 6 out of 10. The next film I watched was The Ring from 2002. I've seen this film before and I really enjoyed it, but I really fell in love with this film this time around. The plot of this film is iconic and very memorable. You watch a tape and die in 7 days, and through that we have a very engaging mystery thriller. I love the symbolism throughout the film, like the ladder and the well and the constant rain through the movie. There's so much reincorporation through the film. It's just a clever and well put together idea. I also like how the film takes place within the 7 days. It adds so much to the tension and the thrilling nature of the film. I love the sense of adventure the film offers. It's not just scary and spooky stuff happens, but the characters are trying to figure out a mystery that has to be resolved in a set amount of time. The film relays its information and unfolds itself in such a satisfying way. I love how certain sounds are used within the film also. I had a marvelous time with this film on this rewatch, and I'm giving this an 8 out of 10. The next film I watched was Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. Just to get into it, the beginning looked like a CGI mess. As CGI becomes more common, I really don't have a problem with its usage, but oh man does it look distracting in the beginning of this film. The film's pacing is a little weird. It doesn't reveal any of its information in an interesting way. Like when one of the characters is revealed to be a bad guy, it felt very abrupt and just not very well handled. The film should have at least had a little more time to set up their conflict, so the audience could care more. And the motivation over why the character becomes evil is actually quite understandable, but it just needs a little more time to cook in the oven, you know? And by the halfway point of this film, I couldn't care less about what really was going on. The best part for me was the end, however. It felt very much like Sam Raimi's style, and I thought it was pretty cool. The ending was a great time, and this was a fun experience overall. However, I'm probably not going to revisit this in the future, and I'm giving this a 5 out of 10. The next film I watched was The Aviator by Martin Scorsese. This film is about the life of Howard Hughes, and it follows him as he makes films and airplanes. The best part of the film for me isn't all the grand production, it's just the main character, and how he starts to fall apart through the film. I don't think the film needed to be as long as it was. The story and script wasn't as strong or engaging as I wanted it to be. It's a good movie, I just didn't get much out of it. The production is very well done. It feels grand yet believable. As I said earlier, the best parts of the film for me were the little details of the character, like its constant need to be clean and its deafness. However, it felt like the creatives didn't fully know what to focus on, so they just kind of focused on multiple things throughout the film. I overall didn't connect with this, but I thought it was a solid film, and I'm giving this a 6 out of 10. The next film I watched was a part of a trilogy, and the film was Shin Kamen Rider. This was directed by Hideaki Anno, known for the Neon Genesis Evangelion anime. This was a film that I've been interested in seeing for about a year, and to prepare, I watched some of the 1970s Kamen Rider show. It was essentially Power Rangers before Power Rangers were made, and I do find the opening title sequence to be charming and memorable. However, I didn't get much from the show. What I was interested in seeing was how the director adapted the material, and oh boy was this film dog shit. This film is an incoherent and complete mess from beginning to end. The big part of the Shin trilogy is taking the old material like Godzilla and making it more modern. However, I kinda wish they went for more of a 1970s vibe, but all we got was kind of shit quality instead. There was just poor cinematography and the lighting felt very cheap. The fight scenes were pretty awful. You can't tell what's happening in the fight scenes half the time. This film desperately needs an introduction and starting of the conflict. It just starts with a car chase and we're thrown into everything. From the beginning, I was very confused, like I was missing something. I wanted more information about what was happening. The film didn't give any time to set up the main character. Everything kinda just happens. The movie is kinda just let's fight the bad guys, yet there's no setting up of any villains. They just walk up to every bad guy and essentially go, let's fight, and then proceed to have some of the worst fighting ever. The only upside I have is that I saw this with a crowd in the theater. Everybody was just laughing at the film, which was fun to do. By the end, I thought this film was a total mess and I'm giving this a 2 out of 10. The next film I watched was Shin Godzilla. After watching Shin Kamen Rider, I wanted to know the quality of the other films in this loose trilogy. This was also directed by Hideaki Anno, and I can say that this film is at least more competent and better structured. The beginning is still very quick, but we get a proper introduction to the conflict, and the conflict was Godzilla. I didn't like how much unnecessary explanation there was. There was a lot of military and government people talking, and that's actually a major part of the film. I enjoyed the monster scenes for the most part, and found certain scenes with Godzilla to be very effective, but I wish that there was just a little less scenes with government people talking. This is definitely a better film than Shin Kamen Rider, and I'm giving this a 5 out of 10. The next film I watched was Shin Ultraman, the next in the trilogy of the Shin films. I don't know what else to call them. The order of the films were Godzilla, this one, Shin Ultraman, and then Shin Kamen Rider. I watched them in a very confusing way. That being said, this was still more competent than Shin Kamen Rider, but not as engaging as Godzilla. This is about a bunch of monsters that are attacking Japan, and a big metal guy named Ultraman stops the monsters. This film is set up more into segments where there's different conflicts every half hour. I thought certain moments that reveal information was effective. However, this film also has a lot of government people talking as well, and it definitely gets boring after a while. I didn't enjoy or find myself engaged by the end. Out of the 3 films, the most entertaining one has to be Shin Kamen Rider for me, even though it was a total mess. It was just a fascinating watch for me. It was just fascinating to see the mess unfold. Anyways, I'm giving this also a 5 out of 10. The next film I watched was Joker, starring Joaquin Phoenix. This was a very popular film when it came out, with a little bit of controversy here and there. This film is about the comic book villain Joker, set in a realistic Gotham City. Joaquin Phoenix's performance as the Joker was extremely well done and well realized. His laugh was very interesting in his movie. It's more of a condition that happens when he's in distress, which I find to be more interesting to the character. There's quite a bit of character details here and there that are interesting to pick up on. On this rewatch, I found it to be a bit more sad than I remembered it being. I really felt for the character, and seeing his life and mental health fall apart was a sad experience. The film also deals with a crumbling healthcare system, and how society fails people. Yes, I used the word society. There are problems I have about this film, but I really enjoyed my experience overall. Also, the title for the Joker sequel is very stupid and funny. It's called Joker Folie à Deux, like they had to make it French. Anyways, I'm giving this a 7 out of 10. The next film I watched was Spider-Man Into the Spiderverse. I was preparing for the new Spiderverse movie, and oh boy am I excited. This is another rewatch, and yep, do I still love this movie. This is an animated Spider-Man film that takes the animation to its fullest. There's just so much an animated film can do that you just can't do with a live action film. This film has more of a comic book feel to the animation that felt very purposeful. I love the energy and pacing of this movie. The character of Miles Morales in this film is very fun and great to watch. The film has an amazing character arc that is really satisfying to experience. Seeing him fully form into Spider-Man and doing it successfully was so much fun. The music and sound choices were really well done for me. It's an engaging piece, it just leaves me satisfied. Along with the story feeling tight and complete, I'm giving this an 8 out of 10. The next film I watched after the first Spider-Verse was the sequel, Across the Spider-Verse. The things with sequels, especially to films that do very well financially, is that they can feel like retreads of the first one. Like they do the same things and have the same arcs within the story, but do it just a little bit different. But with this film, it truly felt like it was trying to say something new and continue this universe with a different story. The same I said about the first film I can say here. It's an energetic and satisfying time from beginning to end. I love the story beats in this film. There's a point where someone was getting chased within the movie and it was so satisfying to watch. The story was told very effectively and the villain was told effectively as well. This film does a fantastic job being its own thing, as well as getting me excited for what else is to come. I definitely will be watching this again on 4K Blu-ray, and I'm also giving this an 8 out of 10. The next film I watched was Bowling for Columbine. a documentary from the early 2000s about mostly guns, evil corporations, life itself, as well as a little bit of bowling thrown into the mix. Even though this is a biased film for sure, I found the film to be very informative about certain topics, as well as showing gun culture in the United States in comparison to Canada. This film is a hard one to watch because of the subject matter of school shootings, and just gun violence in general. What made me sad about this film is that it's 20-something years old, and we're still having the same arguments about gun rights to this day. Nothing has changed since this film. This film could have been made this year and it still rings accurate and topical. That sort of makes me depressed, but oh well. I found this film to have a soul and heart towards individuals, which is always impactful for me, especially in documentaries and real-world subjects. I really loved this film and I'm giving this an 8 out of 10. The next film I watched was another documentary from Michael Moore called Sicko. This time, instead of guns, he talks about how horrible and manipulative the healthcare system is in America. Everybody knows how coercive and all-around shit the United States healthcare system can be, especially for the middle and lower class, but I didn't know how bad it actually got. Like his other film, the material still rings true to this day, and nothing has changed or been improved. I didn't think this documentary flowed as well as his last one, which was Bowling for Columbine. This was still an informative and fascinatingly sad watch. I'm gonna give this one a 7 out of 10. The next film I watched was Hiroshima Mon Amour. This is a romance film set in Japan that discusses the time the nuclear bombs dropped in Hiroshima. I loved the editing and pacing in the beginning. It was very engaging and hypnotic. I liked the conflict between the characters and the tension between them. However, I didn't love this film. By the middle and end, I wasn't fully enjoying my experience. I wish the romance was better handled, but that's just for me personally. This is still a wonderful film that has some pretty great editing choices in the beginning, and I'm gonna give this a 7 out of 10. The next film I watched was Alita Battle Angel. This is a pretty fun watch about a robot girl that learns and experiences life in this futuristic world. The CGI was kind of weird at first, but I got used to it. The movie does a good job developing this world, as well as the villains and main character. The writing does a good job developing character motivations for the villains and supporting characters. I understood why people were doing what they were doing. There were some stupid and silly moments near the end, and the ending was definitely not satisfying for me. The movie is the first part of a story that probably won't be finished, which is unfortunate. There's nothing really to complain about other than some silly moments here and there that I didn't connect with. I enjoyed my time with this film and I'm probably not going to watch this again. I'm giving this a strong 5 out of 10. The next film I watched after that was Elephant from 2003, and I did not like this film at all. The film follows high school students during a single day, and then a school shooting takes place. This was made off the heels of the Columbine shooting, and was supposed to be a study on why someone would do something so horrible, but they put no time into actually defining why the shooters would do those things. The only characteristics the shooters get is that they play video games and are gay. For one thing, it's insulting to gay people to lump sexual identity with school shootings, and video games do not cause school shootings. This is a terribly informed film that doesn't offer really anything. The majority of the film just follows kids as they walk around their school, which really isn't character development. It's just them walking around and saying hi to each other every once in a while. The film goes nowhere, is terribly informed, and just capitalizes on school shootings just to make something pretentious. I'm giving this a 3 out of 10. The next film I watched was Tetsuo the Iron Man. This was a wild ride of a movie. This movie is an absurdist and surrealist film about a man who transforms into metal, I think. It's a very quick watch that doesn't stop at all. It's so fast paced that it's a little headache inducing. The filmmakers always find a way to be creative with their ideas. It's absurd and a little fucked up in the middle. It's a quick and fast watch that has a crazy fast pace to the film. This is more art house, so if you're into that kind of stuff, I would recommend this for sure. And I'm giving this a light 7 out of 10. The next film I watched was A Rainy Day in New York, from the bad man himself, Woody Allen. Woody Allen is a controversial figure because he did some abusive stuff many years ago. Now, I really don't like Woody Allen as a person, and my enjoyment of his movies kind of reflect that. The more Woody Allen is in his movies, the less I really like them. Like Manhattan, which is essentially about Woody Allen's life. And through that film, I can't help but to think about how much of a piece of shit the guy is. I like Woody Allen's work when there's nothing really to do with him, like Midnight in Paris. With this film, luckily there's no Woody Allen in this movie, from what I remembered, but it's still not a good watch. The majority of my dislike of this film comes from the characters. All the characters come off the exact same, it just doesn't work for the movie. Everyone in this is a preppy snob and they all talk the exact same way, and the story really is just about the characters and their journey, so that's all you get out of the movie. And if I'm not connecting with the characters, I'm really getting nothing from this movie. I didn't really like the cinematography also. There was this one scene that looked particularly ugly as well. The older I get, the less I'm charmed by Woody Allen's style. Maybe it's because of his controversies, I don't really know. All I know is that I really didn't enjoy this one, and I'm giving this a light 4 out of 10. The next film I watched was A Man with a Movie Camera. This is an expressive and experimental 1920s documentary about life and people. With movies from this era, the soundtrack can vary from differing copies of the film. Now, the soundtrack I listened to with the film greatly helped establish a tone and atmosphere. I found myself hypnotized by this film. I found the subjects in the life of the 1920s to be very fascinating. This film can be best described as an early form of the documentary Koyani Scazzi, which is another experimental documentary about nature, life, and people. I love the visual symbolism in this film, and I thought the runtime was perfect. I really loved this, and I'm giving this an 8 out of 10. The next film I watched a bunch of movies this time, was Jodorowsky's Dune. Alejandro Jodorowsky is a Chilean-French director, best known for films like El Topo and The Holy Mountain. He's a very strange and surreal filmmaker that tried to make Dune into a film from the 70s and 80s. This documentary follows his creative and artistic journey into trying to get the film made. Jodorowsky is a pretty interesting person, and he's practically in the whole film. He said some pretty crazy stuff in this documentary. This film was very engaging, and seeing an outline of what this man wanted to make was very interesting as well. It made me want to watch the film that was never made. And why the film was never made was, of course, because of studio interference. Big studios always have to do stupid stuff and ruin something. I love watching behind the scenes and the making ofs for films, and this whole documentary was a well thought out version of that. This was a very fun watch. It left me pretty satisfied, and I'm giving this an 8 out of 10. The next film I watched was Transformers: Rise of Beasts, in the movie theaters. I was expecting to hate this one, but I found myself enjoying it to a degree. Now, yes, I did throw back a drink or two. However, I didn't think that this movie was all that bad. I thought the story was pretty average, nothing really special, but I found myself enjoying it for what it was. The only character I really didn't like was Pete Davidson's character. The final fight scene near the end wasn't all that bad, and one part was pretty fun to watch. There's not much else to say about this film. Robo animals fight things. That's pretty much it. I enjoyed my time, and I'm giving this a 5 out of 10. The next film I watched was Last and First Men. This is a science fiction documentary about life 20,000 years in the future. I loved this film. Now, this film was told in a very strange way, with the whole of the story being told through voiceover, along with beautiful shots that look like futuristic yet ancient objects. Tilda Swinton does a fantastic job doing the voice work and telling this interesting story. I loved the music in this film. I love films that can hypnotize me with audio and visuals, and this was a hypnotic experience. I thought the film was fantastic, and I'll definitely be watching this again. It's more experimental of a film, so if you're into that kind of stuff, I would highly recommend this. That being said, I'm giving this a 9 out of 10. The next film I watched was Sisu. This was marketed as a John Wick style movie, and while there was some action here and there, I didn't think the action was on par with John Wick. Just to talk about the action, it was choppy and not very well handled. The thing I really didn't like about this movie was the writing of the situations. How the main character would get in and out of situations felt very lazy and stupid. Like one situation he gets into because he fell asleep, and when he wakes up right to the bad guys. First off, why would he fall asleep on the main road that the bad guys were driving on? It's just a dumb movie that I didn't get much out of in terms of characters, story, or even the action, and I'm giving this a light 4 out of 10. The next film I watched was Blackberry. This was directed by Canadian director Matt Johnson and was pretty good. One thing that really elevated the already interesting story was the performances. The guy who played Jim Bosley did a fantastic job being aggressive and hard-headed. The energy inside the performances are what kept me entertained in the film mostly. That being said, the story was still fun to watch. The story is nothing groundbreaking. It's just a rags to riches type story about the making of the Blackberry phone. It was just handled in a pretty satisfying way, and I'm giving this a light 7 out of 10. The next film I watched after that was a movie called Basketcase. This is a 1980s horror film about a guy who carries a basket around with a monster inside. This is a pretty shit film that has gained quite a cult following. The performances are all equally terrible. There are some things about this film that make it funny and entertaining, one of them being the monster itself. The monster just screams the whole time, and the way it looks and moves is just pretty silly. The main character can telepathically hear the monster, which is pretty funny. The performances are also funny as well. This is a great film to get some friends over and make fun of it. Nothing about this movie is of quality, and I'm giving this little guy a 2 out of 10. The next film I watched was Wes Anderson's newest film, Asteroid City. Wes Anderson has become a polarizing director for some people. Some people love his works and others hate it. I fall into the love it camp. I think most of his films are pretty fantastic, with the Grand Budapest Hotel being my favorite from him. I love his style, and I find the humor in his films to be very charming. When it comes to his newest film, the humor and directing isn't at his best, but I still very much enjoyed my time. As I said, I love the way his films look. He has a very specific style that he's crafted over the years. It's very unique to him. Very little amount of directors can say that they have a style that is unique and just theirs. Not to say that other people can't make a film like Wes Anderson, but they will be compared to Wes Anderson. Anyways, the film, like all of his works, has a humor that is subtle and charming. I didn't find myself fully enjoying all the characters in this film, and some aspects of the film did get a little annoying to me, like the constant cutting to different acts, like the film would say Act 1, Act 2, and so on, but it would do it all the time, which got a little grating to me after a while. The story isn't as interesting this time around. Even someone within the film says that they don't understand the story, which is pretty funny. There's plenty that I enjoyed with this film, even though it's not my favorite from him by quite a bit. I'm giving this a light 7 out of 10. And the next film I watched was I'm Thinking of Ending Things by Charlie Kaufman. This at first came across as a very confusing film for me. However, on this rewatch, I had such a deeply personal experience with this film. I just connected so much with the themes and the subject. What I really love about this film is that everything reinforces its ideas. I could spend a really long time talking about the symbolism, the dialogue, and essentially everything about this movie, and how it all comes together. One thing that I will talk about that is symbolism would be the basement within the film. This is a very metaphorical film, and the basement I feel like represents multiple things, and this is how I interpret the film. But an important part about the basement would be a loss of dreams and resenting what was once something you loved. In the film, the main character hates the basement and resents it, and the main character comes to learn what is in the basement was the main character's old paintings, something he once loved doing. I think it's trying to communicate that the main character had dreams that he gave up and came to hate and resent his dreams. He resents something he once wanted a long time ago. It's hard to talk about this film without fully going into it and analyzing it, but it's a film about many things, and some very dark subject matters like suicide and depression. The dialogue is perfect in this film for me personally. As I said earlier, everything in the writing reincorporates and strengthens itself. I found myself falling in love with this film on this rewatch, and I'm giving this a 10 out of 10, and a spot on the favorites list. The next film I watched right after I'm Thinking of Ending Things is Charlie Kaufman's other film, Synecdoche, New York. I wanted to see how I felt about this film in comparison to I'm Thinking of Ending Things, because as I said, I had such a powerful and emotional experience with it. And while I really loved this film, I didn't get the emotional and powerful experience from this film that I did with I'm Thinking of Ending Things. I think it's because there's so much going on with this movie, but it's harder for me to reach something on a more emotional level for me personally. I still love the writing. It's a very well written film that has a lot of purposeful symbolism, and as I said in my previous review, the writing all reincorporates itself. That's just a common trend with all of Kaufman's works. It's just really strong and purposeful writing. The film has a lot of material going on with the story. However, there's a point to it, and the movie flows very well. I found myself really experiencing this dark film as a comedy. There's just so much absurd moments that I found myself laughing at some really dark stuff. This was a dark comedy for me, what can I say? One of the main subjects about this film is brutal honesty, and I really love that just from a personal level, not even a filmmaking perspective. There's just so much you can get from this movie. But this can be a movie where if you're not connecting with it, you'll probably think it's trash. I personally love the writing and found quite a bit to take away from this movie, and I'm gonna give this a 9 out of 10. We're almost done with the reviews, just a few more left. The next film I watched was A Room with the View from the 1980s. This was an adaptation from the book with the same name. One thing I found myself enjoying in the beginning was the very wide shots of the city. For a while, it was a very pretty film to look at, and that's about all I really enjoyed from this film. I didn't connect with this really at all. I didn't care about the characters, the story, the romance, or anything. This was supposed to be a romance, but it gets bogged down with other stuff, and the romance didn't feel rewarding or satisfying in the slightest to me. Some people find enjoyment with these types of movies like Pride and Prejudice because they find the main characters to be hot. I need a little more from the movie to care about what's going on. I didn't connect with this one unfortunately, and I'm gonna give this a 5 out of 10. The next film I watched was Past Lives. This was the directorial debut for Celine Song, and it was fantastic, especially for a first feature film. What I really loved about this film would be the writing and characters. This is a love story that has emotionally conflicting elements that comes together to create a personal and deeply impactful story. The film does a good job actually developing the relationship between the two characters. I love romance movies that teach you a lesson about the world, and this film teaches you some hard lessons that I feel everyone can relate to. I love this movie and I'm giving this a strong 8 out of 10, close to a 9. The next film I watched was Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. This, I believe, is the 5th Indiana Jones film, and the man is getting pretty old at this point. However, they do hide the stunt doubles pretty well in this. This time around, the man Dr. Jones is looking for 2 parts of a dial, and once it's connected, some crazy stuff happens. Now, I really liked the first section of this film. I thought the camera work was pretty interesting, and it was exciting to watch. However, the movie does not keep that energy up through the runtime of 2 hours and 30 minutes. That's one problem I kind of have with this film. I don't don't think it should be as long as it was. The middle is bogged down with some uninteresting moments, and I found myself bored with the film after a while. Along with the camera work that I enjoyed, it just turned stale and uninspired. I thought the ending was pretty stupid. I understand that the Indiana Jones endings always have a mystical element to them, but this one I thought was over the top and stupid for me personally. There was some character development in this that I did enjoy, but I found this to be a long slog with an over-the-top ending, and I'm giving this a light 5 out of 10. The next film I watched was The Angelic Conversation by the director Derek Jarman. This is a 1980s art house film. The film consists of slowed down footage over Shakespearean sonnets about love. This director is kinda known for being a bit different and being a bit of an auteur. I personally did not connect with this film. I found the material to be slow and unrewarding. I didn't really like the music and sound in this film. This kinda just felt like it was thrown together, and I say that respectfully. If you enjoy some art house, then this might be something to check out, but I didn't connect with this one and I'm giving this a 4 out of 10. The next film I watched was War Requiem by the same director, Derek Jarman. While I didn't enjoy his previous film, I found myself connecting more with this one for sure. This is a war story told with no dialogue, only music and voiceover work. One thing I enjoyed from this film was the cinematography and production. I like that it builds its characters and events mostly through visuals. However, I didn't find myself fully appreciating this as much as I wanted to. I could only connect so much with this. I did enjoy my time, but I'll probably won't watch this one again. I'm giving this a 6 out of 10. And the last film I'm talking about for this video is a film called Blue by Derek Jarman again. This film is probably his most unique film. The whole film is just a blue background with a story told behind it. So if you like atmospheric audiobooks, then you'll probably enjoy this. Like the majority of this director's films that I've seen, I just don't connect with it like other people do. Some people have said that this is an atmospheric masterpiece, but I just don't see it the same way. It's just blue. I didn't find myself fully engaging with the story as well. I felt like it kind of just rambled along. I appreciate this director for being unique and actually trying to tell stories in a different way, but with this, I'm giving it a 5 out of 10. And that is all for this long movie roundup. I watched a lot of movies recently and I'm still chugging along. If you enjoyed this, please leave a like and subscribe. I'm Thorough Churro, and I'm out of here. Peace.